Hi, everyone, and welcome to Odd Ducklings. Today, I actually wanted to talk to you all about why I talk about my failures. I've had this being said to me that some of my posts seems apologetic, and with that in mind, I just want to say I'm not apologizing for anything. Despite it not being to everybody's taste, it is quite intentional. When I started this podcast, I knew a lot less than I know today. Today will be a short episode. In today's episode, I'll be mostly talking about why I advertise failure. And I want to start with the fact that it's absolutely okay if you don't agree with how I'm doing it, and if you think I might have jumped the boat a bit too soon. I don't use idioms that well, so sorry if this one's not correct. But I did want to share my 2 cents about this because I've had some interesting conversations, and I think it's worth acknowledging that there is a decision here that I've made to publish a podcast despite knowing that I don't have all the answers. It's not 100% professional, and I am not a company. And I find that due to the fact that I'm just a person going through a project and a learning curve, this is something that is valid. That being said, I actually have 3 reasons as to why I think this approach is the right approach. And, whether you agree or not, it's absolutely okay. If you keep staying with me and going through the motion, I would love that. But if that feels like too much for you, at some point this podcast will be a lot better. I will still be awkward old me. But yeah, that's okay. That's completely up to you. You do not have to listen to this content. And I hope you do. But despite being welcomed, this is not mandatory. Let's start with number 1, as you do. First reason why I am willing to make mistakes publicly, talk about them, get feedback, and make improvements. And I think if you come from the world of tech, you kind of already know where I'm going. And it kind of carries a very, very big header of being agile or the agile methodology. So the idea of having agility within a product, being able to make multiple iterations and make improvements faster and in a more direct way. The reason I find this to be something that I feel very strongly about is because, if you haven't known, I worked as product manager as well as a product designer and leading product design teams. I find the agile system, the methodology, to be really one of the best ways to approach growth and to make sure that what you're making is the most relevant product for the people who need it. In contradiction to Agile, basically what you see in old school companies is what we call waterfall. In waterfall, what you would do is that you would define all of the steps that you need to be going through from step A to B, releasing a product and giving it away to customer or just like publishing it. And once you've reached point B, there's no more iteration. You're just going to have another waterfall. There's not a lot of space for improvement in the middle. The bottom line is you move from point A to point B. Point B, it's done and you set it out. What Agile means is short iterations that you can release as soon as possible, learn from, review what you can improve, and then send it back the next time better, in a better position. Now that, just to make it absolutely clear, still needs to be a viable product. It needs to be in working order. It needs to bring value. And whenever we are producing a feature or we're producing a podcast or whatever it is that we are doing in the Agile method, we want to make sure that what we put out there is covering what we call minimum viable product. I kind of like the Agile methodology. I come from the world of tech. I've been working in product teams for about 10 years or so. And I've had a lot of companies use different methodologies. Mainly, we're talking about Scrum or Agile or, sadly, Waterfall. And in a nutshell, of all the methodologies that I've seen, there's one that really aims to create improvement, to create communication that iterates and makes everything, in my opinion, better. Of course, with companies, it's not always an option, but as an individual person, I can definitely afford to make my own choice about how I run this nonprofit podcast. So, with that in mind, just in a nutshell, what Agile means is yes, I need to define a product that brings value. And through some iteration and some testing, I reach a position where I can release. It's not perfect because perfect is the enemy of done, especially for people like me who are a bit too perfectionistic for their own good. So when I actually had to go and define this process of how I'm going to do a podcast about neurodiversity, about mental health, about careers, I thought it was kind of a perfect approach to define the goals of what is the minimum viable product and what are the things that need to improve with time. And that's how I kickstarted this. For me, the idea of Agile is making sure that whatever you do put out there, it brings value. And in my opinion, and to the best of my ability, what I've tried to do with every post, with every episode that I've done is make improvement, bring value, collect feedback, learn, and repeat. And in a nutshell, that is Agile, and that's what I'm trying to do. Now, you see that and you say, but couldn't you have improved XYZ? And maybe. I don't know what XYZ is, honestly. So you can say, but that doesn't excuse why you put out your mistakes, right? Because, I mean, you can be agile at your own home. Nobody needs to know. But Agile kind of loses its touch when it's lacking on data and feedbacks and real life experiences. Because the bottom line is, I could refine this for as long as I want. And when I send it out, there will still be something to learn. So I can send this out now, bring value, learn, reiterate, maybe even fix one of the episodes where the sound is not very good. I'd rather have something out than wait until I'm in a good position, then take it out and be very frustrated because I either spend a week, 2 weeks per episode, and then I have another cycle of 2 weeks or 1 week, depending on what I choose for that specific iteration. 3 months, for example. And at the end of 3 months, I've learned nothing from people who are not immediately near me, have been through my process, have read everything, have seen everything. I've not necessarily cracked all the details about how technically things are working. And it's just going to be a lot more frustrating because I did not bring value. And I'm basically going to have to either live with something that I'm not happy with or go back and fix everything. What I like about the Agile methodology is that I could give you an episode or two and I could immediately take insights. I could look at the statistics of how people interacted with it, how they interacted with my posts. I can learn how people reacted to different types of questions, of phrasings, of graphics. I could do all of that, but I cannot do all of that if I sit at home and keep it to myself. And I'm trying to take you along with me for the ride because honestly, I think it's fun. I think talking about this process is something that you can help improve. You can help me shape this so that this could be something that you like. And if I took 3 months to make the same product, to make the same 3 episodes, I would have no external feedback. I would have no data points. I would have only this limited amount of information that's within my household and friend circle. And that means that whatever I would put out there might be a better product, but it will not be a better product for you. So with that being said, I hope that the third and the fourth and all the episodes coming after that will get better and better, and they will be more to your taste. And if you feel like that's not yet the case, this is me saying once again, the entire cycle is I put it out there to the best of my ability, but within the limitation of time. So sometimes the best of my ability could take a year, and we're not doing that. We're doing it within this limitation. And then I'm also very much enjoying your feedback. And some of you have already done this, and it has been so beneficial for me. So thank you. Anybody who's already done this, everybody who's already contacted me, gave me a bit of something to think about. I appreciate it so much. It helps me grow and it helps me get better. And in the future, I would love more. Just, feedback, send it my way. So the first one is Agile. What do you think? Do you think I'm right? Do you think you'd rather have it as a waterfall? Or do you have any other suggestion of how I should manage this? Let me know. Moving on. All right. So we've reached reason number 2. And it kind of builds up on the previous reason. Because if we talked about Agile and how multiple iterations, admitting when things were not perfect or when they could have been better or different, and basically not only making a better product, but making a better product for the person who's going to consume it, who's going to take more value from it, that being you guys. So with that in mind, what we're looking at here is easier to explain by saying, what are the values of this podcast? Because the whole idea of having a podcast to talk about mental health, to talk about neurodiversity, to talk about careers and work-life balance is to talk about hardships we went through, mistakes we've done, things that didn't go according to plan, not necessarily by anyone's fault. But we don't always apply this to our public figure now, do we? And I think if we state that this podcast is here to talk about this, to openly say we are human, we feel things, we make mistakes, why can't we say this about making a podcast? Because I'm not making this product for me. I'm making it for a potential community of people who agree with these values, who want to not be afraid to talk about mistakes because that's the only way we grow, and not be afraid to talk about solutions. So I don't need to hide behind just forums for podcasters to look for solutions. I have everybody who wants to find solution, and not all the solutions are podcast related, right? Some of you might say, this and this content wasn't what I was looking for. It wasn't what I was expecting. And that would be super helpful because, accumulated with seeing the statistics of people's behavior and reaction to other content I put out there, I can make an assumption. I can go on something. I can try something new. And you can be there with me. You can make that impact. So we're building a community based on this value of it's okay to not be perfect. Or for lack of a better word, I'm using perfect, but it's okay to put something out there that could be refined. But it needs to bring value. I hope I've achieved that much. I mean, I'm sending this message out to you. If you feel like I could bring more value, if there's anything specific you want me to be bringing to the table, I'd be more than happy to hear you out. If I'm kind of just trying to summarize everything I just said, it all comes down to if I have a certain value and a certain expectation of talking openly about hardships and mistakes and talking openly about how things can be solved and what are the tools and what are the ways to approach these things to be a better person, what better way do I have to do that than to actively do that? You are coming with me on this process of reiterating on the voice that this podcast has. You are a part of this, at the moment, community that helps shape a certain statement to the world that says it's okay to not do well as long as you can take the ownership and you can take the feedback and you can work on that. And if we're saying that when it comes to mental health and when it comes to handling yourself as in your career, I'm definitely saying that on my personal project that I feel very, very strongly about. I hope it's clear, but what I'm saying is we are not just this pretty picture that we put on Instagram or TikTok or social media. We are complex people and we go through processes. And especially in my world of product, it's way more interesting. It's way more endearing. And well, if you are a part of my process, you get to say, right? You get to be a part, you get to be a community. This is with your feedback just as much your product as it is mine. And that's what we can do, not just with this podcast, but in general. If we share the process with other people, we can make this process something that's a bit more united. All right, and on to the next and last reason. And as you've noticed, with the way my brain kind of works, they all kind of tie in together into, I don't know, a tapestry of sort. And the last one is no different. So the last, third reason why I share my mistakes. All of these reasons kind of make a big tapestry. We separate them because they have an identity of their own, but in a nutshell, you can't do one without the other. If I kind of continue from where I stopped regarding this being about values and about what this podcast is trying to communicate about not being afraid to talk and learn from our mistakes, and the more publicly, the better, then the last one is the point of and not be ashamed of it. And it's one of the main values that I hope we can talk about in this podcast in general, because if we're going to be talking to people who went through PTSD or live with a certain neurodiversity that they might not always feel comfortable telling people about, then we're going to be giving them the space to say, this is not shameful. And with the same value of there's no reason to be ashamed of being human in the context of mental health, in the context of learning how your brain works and how you can get better with it, it's not shameful for me to be making mistakes. I think it's important that I don't only acknowledge these mistakes, because mistakes will be done, whether I tell you about it or not. And I think a lot of times when people say, like, why are you talking about your mistakes? They're not necessarily saying, why are you doing those mistakes? Some do, but they're saying, why do you put your dirty laundry out for everybody to see? That makes a situation where they can know that you make a mistake, and that's shameful. But it's not. And maybe it's something for me within myself. And part of the process of making this podcast is for me to be managing my vices. And one of them is that I'm a bit of a perfectionist, which is not to say that everything I put out there is perfect, but that I ruminate over mistakes and I try to hide them, historically at least. As I grow, as I get older, this is something I absolutely try to eliminate. I try to be aware of my mistakes, which has not always been the case, and I try to not carry this shame with me. And the first part of not carrying the shame with you is proudly carrying it right here, telling you guys, listen, I did not think about making graphics for these episodes. That was a mistake. I need to think about how this entire thing can look a bit more professional. I need to be spending more time talking to you on social media, directly in the pages, or just one-on-one with people who matter, who've had the bad luck of being on the other side of this, of having me not do that, not communicate with them, despite them definitely being owed communication. I apologize, because this was a mistake. And it doesn't mean I'm not sorry for this, but I will not be ashamed of making mistakes. I will take them and I will grow, and I hope that that doesn't turn you all off, because if I'm honest, I'm going to keep making mistakes. and I'm going to be talking about them if I think it's relevant, if I think it's interesting, if it's something that you can help me make better. I'm going to say it out loud so that you can come and say, no, I don't like this. I think you should do it differently. Otherwise, I'm not being agile. I'm not standing up to the standards that I'm very clearly trying to communicate with this podcast. And lastly, I'm introducing shame into something that is so natural. So I hope this helped, or I hope it was interesting to get a bit of a nitpick into why certain things are being done a certain way, why I chose to do these things a certain way. And with that being said, if you've reached this far, I just want to say thank you. Again, let me know if you want more of these sort of episodes, kind of talking about why I do certain things or how I took certain aspects of conversation, something a bit more of like my insights and me kind of pinpointing my thoughts directly to you. Let me know if that was something that you enjoyed. And with that being said, stay odd and have a great day.